Welcome.
It's great to be here.
Out of all of the things that you could do, why agriculture?
Great question. And of all the stuff that's going on that's nuanced in the area I work in with technology, and you use the word agriculture, it's such an old word that associates with old ways. But when actuality, when I first started looking into the recent nuances in agriculture, it is 100% unknown and unexplored to how we take care of the land today.
Why do you think that is?
I think because agricultural ways in the past worked for the results you had, but I don't think people knew the detriment that handling and working in the space of agriculture was doing. And because there was so much, land was so vast, and you didn't see the effects of land, you didn't see those effects show up until recently. And I believe it's just everyone was naive, very naive to what was going on with agriculture.
How do people respond to the word regenerative or organic or both in the space that you work in?
I believe they're more familiar with organic because of where of commerce. People shop and they see organic.
Mhm.
And it's probably it's a word that's used to, it's been handled without pesticides and handled in a different way where it's not artificially grown. As opposed to regenerative, I know it's a new word to a lot of people, but I believe they work hand in hand, except regenerative is a way to, it's a healing. It's a healing and a betterment into what is around you.
Why diving into that when you say regenerative is a healing? Almost like a stem cell is of the body and we regenerate ourselves, or what do you mean more as regenerative?
Well, there's places that there's land that needs it, that hasn't had the opportunity because it doesn't have it didn't have the moisture content or the microbials, and for that soil to be that healthy, because it's place and time. It could have been because it was exploited, or was a vast inland sea, or it just didn't have it just never had a chance to heal or to be put to use. But also, it's not so much the regenerative part of it; it's the maintaining of it. And then if you could see if you know how the whole process of regenerative agriculture works, you would see that it's very symbiotic to how we could how we can work in communities and humans in the same way.
Can you describe that to your best of your knowledge of your understanding of that? When you say the process, if you saw the process.
Okay, so I would say I'm fairly new at this, but my background and my background with working with trees and always walking amongst the land with a small footprint, and growing up and surrounding myself with indigenous people, I've always been in a position to show respect to the land and understand its sacredness, and you can see it's going to show you something, and you feel what it's showing you. So I recently just went down this rabbit hole, so to speak, of what this whole idea of regenerative agriculture is. And I was I was kind of awestruck and also blown away by, this is right in front of us, but nobody ever did anything with it.
Yeah.
And I think it's a way that if you understand the basis of regenerative agriculture, you could take those same principles into communities, large communities, small communities, and heal what is wrong with those communities as well. And recently, I was looking at these pictures because nothing's original. These aren't my original thoughts. But recently, but everything makes sense, right? So recently, I was looking at these pictures, and they were saying that it showed the tree of life, and it was a picture of this a tree of life, but then next to it, it had the human placenta. It was the same. Then they also showed a crosscut of a piece of wood, and it took the human fingerprint, and those were the same. And then it took the foliage of a tree, and it compared it to your lungs, and those were the same pictures.
Wow.
Then if you took the leaves and your cardiovascular system that you have as a human in you, and also the tributaries and the rivers, those are all the same.
Wow.
So without getting into different, without switching cultures and different thoughts, it's what we say in Lakota is mitakue osin, which is that's all related. All that stuff is related.
Wow.
So I know that there is, when you study it and you look into it, it's a way to be holistic. If you see what's below your feet, you'll see that you could heal that the same way you could heal your the humanistic relationships, that the struggles that we're having today.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone knows the struggles that humanity's having today with
Everything.
Yeah,
Like everything.
not to put values on, but yeah, broken.
What was that word again?
Mitakue.
Mitakue. Mitakue. Mitakue?
Mitakue. So
Mitakue.
we're all related.
Yeah. I like that word. I even like the way the word sounds. Me talk your way. So we're all related.
Yeah.
Wow. So cool. So talking on the same subject, tell us about the time you went to Missoula and you looked over a beautiful plain and you thought there, and we were talking about finance and money on potentially raising money for a gold mine. But cutting into the earth is not something that usually people are looking after. And I can't remember if you could maybe refresh my mind a little bit. And then we also looked at like certain trees, and you're like, Aaron, that's a this tree, that's a this tree, that's a this tree, which showed that maybe there was vegetation coming back up from the mining that was happening all those years ago on the hill. Can you talk about that a little bit of that memory?
Well, probably what you were saying about the mining, because you were probably asking if this was something that would be employment, would be good for Native American communities. And I said, no, they wouldn't be interested in doing any kind of mining because of all the legacy issues that from the past. And it just didn't fit in the cultural values. But your point about the trees, I was just, it was probably because it was in fall, and I was just, I was looking at because I'm not in that country all the time, and I was just amazed at all the different type of firs and all the trees were in these different groves together, and the way they stood. And I was looking at the canopies to it, and you don't see that in a lot of planned settings, but it was just the beauty of it is what struck me. And so I was kind of I was pointing it out to you of how this is all kind of working together on a one symbolic relationship.
In the ecosystem of actually how it's all growing back.
Yes.
Yeah. Barth mentioned a lady that would be good to have on the show in the future that has done something specifically with the mycorrhiza and the sugars. I think this would be a great conversation for you and Abby to have a back and forth on.
Well, Abby's probably familiar with her, and because like I just went down this rabbit hole of all the people that are in this space, and it gave me a tremendous validation of me being in this space as well. And so this gal, who's probably the foremost expert in mycorrhizum and all her research, and I believe she probably won I don't want to say no. I'm not sure if she won the Nobel Peace Prize for her studies or whatever, but she's a PhD out of Oregon, and I had her name Suzanne Simard, and she wrote a book. Are you familiar with her?
I don't know her yet.
So she wrote a book, and it was a New York bestseller, and it was called, I think it was called The Mother Tree.
The Mother Tree. Wow. Okay.
And through all her work, she exposed how mycorrhizums talk and are all connected, mitakue also, underground. and how they lend their sugars, and they lend it from and she found out a mother tree will lend more sugar or create more root space to her natural offspring that what it came from, as opposed to other plant and fauna that's close by. But they're still all sharing this underground highway and connectivity.
Wow.
And she put, and like her work was so good, and her book, of course, her book was on New York bestseller. But when I was watching a few podcasts about her, she said that she was attacked for bad science because she was probably coming after a large industry, shaming them and saying, how can we not, we have to find a way to work together, because there's all this sacredness that's happening underground with the root systems and all this old growth forests. There's got to be a way that we can develop lumber and have commerce and have an economic system, but there's got to be a sacred way and a way to recognize this to happen.
Yeah, for sure.
But it was
so. Abby's done some work in forestry and things like that. So, geeking out on this subject and this lady, just open conversation. We're just guessing, so we're in a science lab. What happened when you were in the forest and the trees and you were cutting away some of those, or trimming back? Right? Does the lumber and the deep root system have a way of new industry?
Of new industry.
Yeah, because there's a way for both to exist, like what Barth just said.
Probably. Something that comes to mind is witnessing the clear-cut areas versus the places in which they select harvested, where they consider the age of the trees and they consider the longevity of the forest, and then they choose certain trees, one for the industry, but then also so that there are different age trees, so that the growth of the forest is uneven, so that, in my belief, if humans disappeared from the face of the planet, then that forest would have its life cycle and live without us, because the old ones would die and make room for the new ones and have that deep connection and be feeding each other the whole time. But when we clear cut, it's just a different kind of disturbance. And we can say it's bad and we can say it's great. Of course, things grow when we clear cut. So what I saw in northern Minnesota was clear cut areas would have massive wildflowers everywhere for a couple years. And we went and planted some flowers too and brought on some natives. The berries, raspberries, blackberries, or blueberries in northern Minnesota would come. So yes to both is sometimes the way I feel, because we know that soil and the planet need major disturbances at times in order to get stronger. It's like a healthy workout in a gym, right?
Yeah, sure.
It's positive stress that makes you stronger.
Yeah. With the fires that just happened in California, that was that huge devastation. Is there a way to build amongst the trees and give the trees what they need, as well as have the people, or do we need to clear cut?
Well, the California fires, those were urban, urban slash little bit of mountain fires with perfect conditions of some sort of
wind
and dryness, the dryness in the air, and probably the sapwoods and just an explosion of what, I think that's different from what you're talking about. Maybe your deep, bigger, larger forests where there's no developments around.
Yeah.
But going back to what Abby's point is that this lady, she also recognized that if you leave one of those trees there and you leave some of these old growth trees there, what they do is they pass on their knowledge and memory to the younger trees of how to communicate and how to share all the microorganisms and sugars on the ground. So it's like leaving an ancient or old one behind that could show you the way forward.
Wow.
Something that came to mind were invasive species. If we have these invasive species that keep coming in and taking over different places, and I think everything does have a place. It's hard to say that anything is wrong when nature is in charge, but maybe there's just some knowledge that's missing within the intelligence of those plants too, that they don't understand, to say, hey, keep space for your neighbors and let's work symbiotically.
I love that, but think about it in addition to,
Yeah.
think about, I love what you just said. You leave an old growth tree there that's fallen down, and now the microorganisms come and they break down the sugars of this tree, but also the memories. I mean, even in technology, they say that we can put so much data on a strand of DNA. So now you have the overgrowth of the organisms, the mycorrhiza coming in and eating the knowledge of that tree and then feeding back to their colonies what that tree experienced, all the years, all the knowledge, all the way they grew the roots. That's what resonated with me with what you just said.
Right. So it's like it's a template and it's a template to move forward through old growth forests that can be passed on to new younger trees, because they've learned all that data still exists underground of how trees and these ecosystems work.
Yeah.
Just like communities.
Yeah. It's beautiful. I mean, what was interesting, what he just said that they said in the book was the trees for their own offspring make way for roots to go. And so it's just like above ground, as above, so below. It's just like above ground, like the lions and all the animals, they're very territorial because they want their herds and their prides to grow. Same with humanity. So the root systems down below want the same thing. They'll make way for their own branches and things. They'll make some way for the other one that probably grow and sneak in there around them as well. But they make way for their own trees.
Well, they know their own they know their own offspring, and they'll lend their own offspring more sugar, and more carbon exchange will happen.
Interesting. Huh. So from an invasive species side, there's people that come in, not people, but organisms that will come in and attack the species for purpose of growth. And they also want their own, they might be invasive to their organism, but they're coming in to encroach upon it, because an organism will get so big, right? Then what do the other organisms do?
Well, invasive species are detrimental because it's not because of what it does within the in the plant fauna life. It's what it does in the wildlife, because it'll crowd out and take away foliage and food for other birds and animals and grazers, and so they become harmed through invasive species.
It's like nature's monocropping in a way, where there's only one thing that takes over, and it's really hard to revert back or regenerate the native species because there is no space. They don't allow any space for it.
Nature's monocropping. That's what you said.
Yeah, that's what Abby said. I believe.
What does monocropping mean?
Monocropping is a single crop in one area. So cornfields, soybean fields are all monocropping.
Interesting.
Alfalfa monocropping.
But if you monocrop, it's okay, but it's how you feed the monocrop. So,
what do you mean how you feed the monocrop?
So if you feed it artificially through artificial fertilizers, it stays in one siloed colonial root system and doesn't communicate outside that.
Okay.
And so it doesn't grow any microorganisms, doesn't share any sugars, doesn't do the carbon exchange.
Okay.
Because its root system is just it's siloed.
Why? In your opinion?
Because we've fed it the alternative. We fed it the fertilizers already for it to grow.
Interesting. It's like domesticating a cat in a way.
Same.
We've domesticated the plant. So the plant doesn't need to go outside of its own root system because we've domesticated the plant.
Yeah, it's not working in nature. It's doing you've grown it to perform one duty, and that's to be consumed at a marketplace quickly and most efficiently for the harvester. It's not you're not growing and taking care of the land and or the soil with everything in the ecosystem considered.
I think Rodale did a research plot side by side with conventional corn and regenerative soil corn, and showed how the organic, without adding the fertilizer, yes, it looked about the same or a little slower than the fertilized corn, and the fertilized corn took off. But later in the season, when the regenerative soiled corn had that mycorrhizal connection, it skyrocketed higher than the fertilized corn, because the fertilized corn only had what it could eat from the beginning fertility, and then it didn't have that connection, so it didn't know how to be in the soil. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
So I'm gonna touch on that one too for a moment. So it's gonna be a roundabout. So 2 parts. So I was down on a project in Utah that had bees, and the farmer had gotten some candy, leftover Christmas candy from the so it was like a cinnamon candy left over, and the bees ate it throughout the wintertime. And when they made their bee honey, it was red and it tasted like cinnamon. Okay, so in plants, we as people think that the plant tastes better the way it looks. We think that the crop is better for us based on the way it looks. So is it one to say that we could give it a chemical or a fertilizer to make it look better, but it might not be healthier for us?
Well, it won't be healthier for you because it hasn't gone through the natural process of how the end product's made.
Meaning, in your opinion?
Well, because you've artificially stimulated it and changed it's like nature has its own recipes. And then when you start substituting different parts in that recipe, it's not the same, doesn't have the same values. It's like you're cooking with margarine instead of butter.
Wow.
But I wanted to go back and say something about Suzanne. So,
absolutely.
and this is what she gave honor to or mention, is that they asked her, when they asked her about her great work and what she was doing and her discoveries, and she humbly said, this is just something I used I'm paraphrasing, but this is something I used modern science for and modern techniques to prove this proof of concept. But she went back and said, well, this has always existed, because she got her validation from some indigenous people that were living in Washington, Oregon area. And she got the same validation from some shaman that were from South America. And she said, this has always been here. It's always existed. And they've always talked about this, but we've never been able to listen to what they were saying.
Wow.
And it even goes back further.
Now, when you say they were saying, what do you mean?
Probably big agriculture, modern day people that manage soil.
Okay.
Soil is the most precious commodity we have probably in the world.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's taken billions and years for it to get to where it is today. And yet we don't respect that and honor that. It's almost like how stars got here. They took a long way to show their light. Well, soil's the same way. Yeah. How it was created, and with all its nutrients and all the things that are comprised in soil, that for it to show itself to be so valuable, that took millions and millions of years for it to say, here I am. But yet modern agriculture, how we do business, doesn't. It just steps on that and actually ruins it. In Lakota, you say it makes it makasika, which is bad soil. It ruins it. And you've seen what I don't want to speak poor mouth Iowa, but their soil was like a 10. But I believe it's on
a 10 of what?
A 10 out of 10. It was the best soil ever. It's very similar to Imperial Valley in California. But now they say it's perhaps a 6. Is because of what we call modern day farming and agricultural practices ruined it.
Yeah, Abby and I were at an event in Iowa, and I overheard someone say in a conversation that if you look at a cancer heat map, you would think that living out in rural farmland is better for you. But if you look at a cancer heat map, because of what we put on our soils, it's actually worse, like heightened cancer out on the farms and fields.
Including Iowa's the highest.
Iowa's the highest? What?
Hmm.
Wow.
I mean, there's that data out there for environmental diseases that we've picked up as people living in the Midwest. But when I first moved into that area, which you would consider the Midwest, 20 years ago, there was a heightened awareness, and I don't know if it was my daughter's mom's. So they were in their 40s and late 40s or 50s. I didn't realize how many people had these glioblastomas, these brain tumors. And I thought, well, maybe it's because you get to that age.
Yeah.
But the more that I asked some questions like, where did you grow up? And a lot of them grew up on rural farms. And so you take their shallow water tables and/or wells and what they're exposed through chemicals and insects abatements.
Mm-hmm.
It's 100% true.
Yeah. Yeah. There was a story said recently, and I'm paraphrasing the story, but why are we putting chemicals on our plants? Maybe you can help me. And then eating it too. I'm paraphrasing.
Yeah. It was a farmer with his son, and the little kid was confused as to why they were putting chemicals on something that they were eating. And it was just a really simple question. It was like, well, why would we do that on food? And then even though it wasn't food for the humans, the dad just said, well, I can't do this anymore, and completely changed after that day.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
it
because
makes sense.
Right. I think when someone's so innocent asks you the basic question, you've never given it any thought. It's because you're going with this is the way we've always done it.
Yeah. I remember when I was in logistics and we were moving these big barrels of orange soda, and literally on the back orange soda, it said hazmat, and it was literally orange soda. And I remember piercing one on a dock, and they let her bring in a hazmat crew just to clean it up. Yet we drink this stuff. Are you kidding me? Crazy to me.
Yeah.
But I guess anything in that concentrated excess could be just terrible. But the chemicals that we put on the plants, I mean, yeah, why not? Is there other options besides chemicals we can put on the plants? Is there an enzyme or a bacillus or a diatomaceous earth or something else we could put on that would be effective?
I'm not sure. But the reason why you do it is because you're doing commercial grows.
Yeah.
And if we went back to family farms and neighborhood gardens, and you took what we did with desktop computers, everyone had one. So you take the model of promoting everyone have a indoor hydroponics or grow house that makes you self-sufficient. Then you don't have to worry about putting all these chemicals because you're doing it yourself. You're working and you're eating and growing what you need.
Yeah.
I can try.
Go for it.
Will you ask the question again?
The question was, is there other
things
that we could use besides chemicals that would create the same thing? So, for example, why do we put chemicals on the commercial crop? We do it so that we don't get fungicides, pesticides, and herb growth, right? So that's really why the name is fungicide, pesticide, or herb. So we don't want the fungus to grow inside of the commercial crop, siloing, right? We're siloing and we're putting exactly what the nutrition is to create the most amount of calories to turn it back over to the people. So we're siloing it, and that crop is fungicide, herbicide, pesticide. Is there another route that we could go that would be better?
So I wanted to have your mind think about why we're doing it, and if the farmer has a cash crop, they need it to be clean in order to get the most amount of money for their crop. And so if you have weeds that are growing in your field of the monocrop to cash crop, you're going to get a lower price because don't have a clean product.
Interesting.
But then you think about the amount, what I would call mining or mineral mining from the ground, which is why Iowa would be a 6 now instead of a 10, because we're mining the nutrients and minerals, right? We're taking it every single year and we're not thinking about giving it back because we just have fertilizer. So that's the answer.
Right.
So now we've already weakened the soil connection with the plants. We've weakened the soil. The soil is trying to figure out how to take care of itself and heal. And a lot of times that's when bad fungicides and bad bacteria come in because they're trying to clean up and trying to fix and repair what we're not giving back to.
Yeah, it makes sense.
So then we just have to build better and stronger herbicides. Herbicide meaning kill any plant that's not genetically modified through Roundup, and fungicide and what did I say? Fungicide, bacteria.
Yeah.
All the things.
Yep, you're doing perfect. It makes sense to me. It actually makes sense to me the way that you're saying it in those regards is, so, okay, there was one thing that you talked about having to do with cash crop recently was, so it was regenerative agricultural, but then utilizing the new practice with the old practice to keep the crop clean. And so here you bring in 30 native seeds and then the cash crop comes in, and then what do you do with the cash crop? You like burn it off or something? Or they end cycle or something it's called?
Green manure?
They terminate maybe? They terminate cycle so they can bring in the crop?
Oh. Yeah. Okay, so maybe not native seed. It would maybe be like an annual cover crop situation, and then they would still use herbicide to kill it in order to plant into it. Was that what you were talking about?
But how can you do this in regenerative spot? So right now that might be the old practice of way to do it, but how could you do that in regenerative where it's healthy and still produce a cash crop?
So this is a good point because there's regenerative agriculture still allows the use of chemicals. So there are a lot of regenerative farmers that use chemical in order to terminate their cover crops in order to put in a cash crop. No till. So we're still using soil health protocols and things, just still using the chemical. And some of them think about that, and some of them are very cognizant of that they're still using chemical. That's where the difference between organic and regenerative come in, or both.
Interesting. So
you have to be excited about experimenting and understanding different avenues of management and making money on different types of crops and economics.
But it sounds to me like, so the value is based on, you said the cleanliness of the crop. So for example, if somebody wants to buy feed and the feed is based on a relative feed value, it's a Timothy, right? So Timothy grass might pull a certain price, but then you or an alfalfa, but then you get these mixed grasses. Mm-hmm. And so that all changes price because you're not getting pure alfalfa, you're not getting pure Timothy, you're getting a mixed grass. Mm-hmm. So the price comes down. And so in regenerative, if we didn't terminate, part of it might just be the bicycle. So people are buying and they want a pure price. And so in our minds, we terminate, get that pure price.
I'll give you a different example. I was thinking more like the grain side of things, where you need the wheat, the corn, and the sorghum seed or the soybean seed to come out. And
the grain.
Okay,
not feed.
Needs to be clean. That's different than feed.
Okay.
Yep. That's my understanding of the field. Anyway.
Interesting. Okay.
So yeah, maybe you'll get a lower price for Timothy and alfalfa, but like you said, I think the right buyer would see the benefit to having a less alfalfa, lesser protein for a cow that's not necessarily ready for pure alfalfa.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah,
I confer with that.
This is where we go deep on the conversation to try and get the most value, I think, out of it so that we can take this back to, more people, more lands. So how do you change the narrative to almost put a certification on there to say, yeah, this isn't certified just alfalfa. This isn't certified just sorghum. This is certified it's a breadth of seeds. It's a breadth of product, but it's mostly sorghum. It's mostly alfalfa, but then there's a breadth of all the other minerals. It's almost like eating bee pollen.
Something that I want to add is that when I was talking about the cash crops and they're being siloed, like you were saying, and being fertilized, and then we have weeds and the bad bacteria or the bad fungi that are trying to take over, it's because the soil is unhealthy. But as soon as we start to resurrect that and change it, we'll start to get more beneficial plants, because people aren't going to truly enjoy pigweed or ragweed in the certain crops. But if we can bring in a cover crop that's full of all of the variety and diversity that an animal might be interested in, that's when I feel like not only are we giving back to the ground, but we're also giving back to the animals that are feeding it and the people that are buying it.
Interesting. Okay, so when we've overmined the ground, right? We've overmined the ground, which creates a stronger fungicide because the fungicide's just thinking it needs to repair the ground, right?
Mainly bacteria. But go ahead.
Mainly bacteria. Okay, so the bacteria just thinks it needs to repair the ground. Bacteria comes in first. Then next comes fungus.
Yeah.
Then next comes, remember the word? Yes, protozoa. And then next comes nematodes. Right? So
in a good system, yeah.
In a good system. So we've overmined the product, the ground. We've overmined it. Now those want to grow in and heal it. The soil wants to heal itself. No different than our own bodies. Somebody comes in and takes a piece out of us. Our body seems to scab, bleed, and go over and start to heal itself, right? So same thing. The ground's healing itself, and it's using that type of microorganism to heal itself, just like we heal ourselves. What do you call that word again? Mitaku.
I was just saying
Mitakue. So Mitakue.
No, but that just means we're all related, and so that I was referring that to the to some of the examples of above ground and below ground.
Yeah.
And
so the soil repairing itself, us repairing itself, Mitakue. We're all related. So if that's the related understanding of the reparation that's happening, now we could introduce higher paying cash crops that aren't pigweed, that aren't the things that people maybe don't see. You could introduce other cover crops that are native that would be better for the animals to do it in a quicker form than the pigweed.
The pigweed is the thing that comes when the soil is low.
The pigweed comes when the soil is low.
Pigweed, ragweed, all these weeds are indicators of what the soil is in need of.
Because they're scavengers.
They're scavengers. And then eventually they become, what's the word? They survive even if you spray them. There's a word for that.
Invasive.
Wow.
That's okay.
There.
We'll come back to that word. Do you know what that word is when they survive even if you spray them?
Cockroach.
Cancer.
What the heck? Antibiotic. When you have bacteria that doesn't, that'll live through
virus.
Antibiotic.
No, it'll live through antibiotic. Bacteria that'll live through an antibiotic.
Well,
antibiotic resistance. You get herbicide resistant weeds. There it is.
Herbicide resistant weeds.
Yeah.
So the pigweed will become herbicide resistant.
That's what I hear. Pigweed and ragweed are some of the strongest ones that try to take over.
Oh, interesting. And they're just trying to repair the soil, give the soil some sort of a matter, organic matter again, so that the other plants can come over and take place and then rebuild the soil. No different than a scab on our body. Wow.
Because they know that the soil is in need of certain minerals and nutrients, and so they're little miners. And so the weeds come in, and if you can read what they're saying, they're actually down in the soil with sometimes deep tap roots, and they're finding all of those minerals and nutrients, and then they're living, and they got all their solar panels, and then they die, and they're giving those nutrients back to the soil that the soil needs. It's like a perfect system.
They're putting carbon and other spreading sugars back into the soil.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, Susan, I want to meet you. I'd love to have you on our show. What's her name again?
Susan Simard. Simard.
I have a feeling that Susan and Abby would geek out.
Oh, 100%.
Said, Barth, we would love to have you come back and geek out with her too.
The other gentleman that that gave me validation to these models, and actually to where Abby went to school, MIU, was a gentleman named Tom Newmark. And I was reading I was reading this book called The Carbon Almanac. And so I was doing my research and doing my due diligence, and his name was as one of the leaders in this Carbon Almanac, or in this space. And so when I looked him up, I listened to this podcast on him, and he was speaking at MIU University. And so I thought, okay, well, this guy's one of the leaders and he's speaking at MIU. Then I thought, okay, then that university, everything has to be real. That was how I did my due diligence.
That's awesome. Who do you think brought Tom Newmark? Do you think it was Steve, or do you think it was the scientist we met? What was that scientist's name? Do you think it was Steve?
It was probably someone else.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it might have been. But was it a webinar series?
Well, he came in. It was an address, so he came. He was invited there for. Oh, wow. I'm not sure if it was a commencement or he was a keynote speaker.
Yeah.
Or
how long ago? If you had to guess,
it was probably a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
But he was the one that I liked his opening assessment when he shook his dad's hand, and he goes, "My dad was from the greatest generation," and he goes, well, if this is the greatest generation, thanks, but no thanks to all the carbon that you gave us in the atmosphere by mismanaging the land.
Wow.
Wow. So tell us more about him. What's his specialty?
Well, he's a subject matter expert, probably in regen agriculture and sequestration of agriculture with carbon. And I believe he has started the movement of the Carbon Almanac, and I haven't really looked at his full, resume, but he's in the space of regen agriculture in the United States and South America.
So him and Al Gore are pretty close.
If
you had to guess.
Right. Well, right. From yeah, possibly.
Yeah.
But this all has to go, But what?
Or was Al Gore before his time, and it was the X guy? He's the guy that does the X series.
Well,
for carbon.
Right. Well, so I don't know. A lot of these guys, they have all the technology, and they're from the greatest economy and nation in the world, but yet they're learning things that existed in the Americas and from indigenous people that's always been here.
Yeah.
And the reason why I say that is because look how we can't figure out the terracotta, that terra soil, that black gold that existed in the Amazon that fed hundreds of thousands of people. And we can't replenish or figure out how they made that super soil.
Yeah. Super soil.
And that was thousands of years ago.
Super soil. I've seen super soil recently, actually.
But the Incas were like the first botanists in the world. If you go up and you look at their structures and their buildings, they have these terraced plots, and they're at different angles, facing the sun for different angles for the equinox at different altitudes. And they were trying to find out what corn grew the best at this equinox and at this altitude.
Wow. Cool. Really?
And so all the work that existed,
and that's where you get some of those native corns that are like rainbowy and purple and blue, and that's the real colors.
Right. So all the, 90% of all drugs come from, the plant from South America and from the plant and fauna in South America.
Wow.
And we only use 10% of what's access that's exposed. So when Abby brought up a question about these, a statement about these invasive species, And a lot of people don't like invasive species because sometimes they're protected. But we don't know why they're here and what they can do, because you don't know if they combine with something and they crossbreed with something. You don't know the power of what they're producing. But we think they're a nuance, and we'll spray them and get rid of them because it's not part of our presentation of a crop we want to put on a grocery store.
Yeah.
So we're very naive of the most sacred commodity that we have, and that's soil. And not to change subjects on you, but it's the same thing with water.
Yeah.
I was reading this book, and it was called The Fourth Phase of Water. And you have the three phases we all know, but they know there's a fourth phase there, and they're trying to figure it out. And when I first started reading and hearing about this, I go, how do you not know what water's about? Which has been around, it's been studied for all these years. We have all this science, but because it's such a assumed commodity and a boring subject, no one studies it.
Yeah.
But there's so much unknown and sacredness within just water.
Yeah, but when we say the fourth phase of water, let's break it down. So phase 1 is solid ice. Phase 1 is liquid. Phase 2 is solid ice. Phase 3 is gaseous. And you're saying there's a fourth phase?
Correct.
Interesting.
And maybe it doesn't stay there that long.
Yeah, almost, yeah, like a quantum phase.
Yeah, and they think that sometimes you see it through sprinkler systems with some farmers when they put it on their crop. And I know that Russia a long time ago did some studies on it, but their experiments were flawed because I believe they had some kind of film within their test tubes or when they were trying to figure out what this fourth phase was.
Yeah.
And so
I believe in this fourth phase, and I think this is I think this is a great change of subject, because recently I was with Abby on some exploratory journeys, and she said to me, Aaron, we are the reason we're doing all this is to bring water back to the how did you say it?
To the ecosystem, to the environment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like the whole reason to build regenerative organic agriculture is to bring water back to the ecosystem.
Because water is life.
Yeah. And so maybe this fourth phase of water in these arid, dry areas where literally the scavenger plants live upon the plains, they're eating with the deep root systems, and the mycorrhiza and the bacteria that are coexisting with them in the space and everything else are coming, and then they're creating the matter and the organic, and then something in the quantum just right says water should exist here again.
And there's a lot of water that does exist, but it's not good for, it has to be, it's contaminated through different salines and other properties. So it's not potable, or if you put on agriculture, it would.
So is the fourth phase a hyper suspension phase that says, we're here, the water's here, it's ready for you, but until everything exists in a perfect condition, it won't present itself?
Barth?
Well, I think it's presented itself, but we just don't know what it is. We don't pay attention to it. And I think people, and I don't know how many, there's a couple billion people on Earth, and very well, people probably have seen it or experienced it somehow. And it's very similar to, you just have to have new eyes and a new experience when you get exposed to something and you'll see it. Like, we might have had this conversation, but do you remember when I told you I was reading about this young guy or this gentleman that was out for the first time in the savannas in Africa, and he was there, and I think I'm not sure if they were there for a cork, if they were looking for cork trees, but they were out in Africa, and he asked some of the experienced people that have been around him all the time, because they're out here in the savannah, and he asked them what this one tree was. And the gentleman kind of condescendingly said, this is named this type of tree, and it's prominent and exists throughout this type of the territory out here all the time. And he started pointing them all out. And this other gentleman that was new to the scene says, I know, I see these trees, but these trees over here are different. They have different leaves. and it was a whole different species of tree that no one knew about
Wow. Wow.
because he didn't assume.
Yeah.
Open eyes.
Open eyes. Ooh, open eyes.
So I've done a little digging into the fourth phase of water. My understanding, so this is like all the things that I've collected in my brain and probably part of my opinion too,
Yes.
is that the fourth phase is the structured water. And I believe that plants and our environment are natural at structuring our water. And we've created all of these alternative systems where we clean the water in city treatments and do all these things, and we send it through crooked pipes and all this stuff. But water has memory. We know that our bodies store all of our lifetime of experiences and traumas and all this stuff. And we wonder why one part of our body hurts all the time. And sometimes you can find that it's because of this one thing that happened in your life, not physical, but mental. So if we know that water holds memory, then I think it's really important for us to understand how we're treating our water and how what we're doing to it. And there are certain ideas of flow forms, they're called. So you can run your water through a system where it brings it in a figure eight or spirals it into existence again, and it brings structure back to it. There are different ways. But I also feel like when the plants, you were talking about what I was talking about with regenerative agriculture, we have plants that are sort of mining the water, or they're in need of the water, and so they find what they need and then they're giving back. So then it's like this cycle, and I believe that water attracts water. So when we start to have a healthy system on our soil, the atmosphere is also going to respond in this cyclical pattern. And another thought is that we should eat our water. And when I hear the idea of that we should eat our water, which means eating everything that's rich in hydration, watermelon, fruit, vegetables, things like that, it means that those plants have the structure within them that our bodies can take in and actually hydrate our cells of our body, because our cells are structured. But if we feed our bodies with straight water, no wonder we have to pee all the time, because it's not actually hydrating our cells to the
Right.
capacity that we have.
It's cellular stacked water that has memory. So it's like live water.
Live.
It's just not moisture. It's just not wet.
Exactly.
It's yeah.
Live
beautiful.
water. It's good.
Well, I believe that. I've done.
I like listening to you to talk about structured water. Tell me more.
Well, I mean, it was some, and I forgot why I got into this. I started reading about these ideas, and maybe it all started with me going, like when you asked about how I'm working in regen soil, because everything I'm doing is in that space with green energy and regenerative. And so I because my training or my education's not from that.
Yeah.
I'm a poli sci guy and a history guy and an international relations guy. I'm not from the sciences, but recently I realized I would have studied chemistry and biology if I could apply it right now of what I knew, because it's so interesting. When you're studying, it's not. But now it's so applicable. I wish I was just I had a doctor's degree in that, but here's the deal. I wouldn't have come in it with these nuanced questions and ideas and my naiveness, and took it on with a passion and a beauty.
Yeah, for sure. 100%.
Of what it shows you.
No different than the gentleman looking at the trees on the savannah and wondering what this was.
Right.
So yeah, really impactful.
It's the same lady that found the arch that they didn't know that existed in Arches National Park. Because if you and I went to Arches and we saw these arches, and we'd say, well, yeah, there's supposed to be an arch here. But she went through every little arch on her little map and then went up to the ranger station and asked what the name of this was and why it wasn't on the map. And they didn't know. And then she, I believe she was like a German tourist. She went and told the park service and showed them an arch that they didn't even know existed in the park.
I love that. That's awesome.
And this wasn't 1800. This was like 20 years ago.
Wow. That's so cool to me. So cool to me. It's amazing how Mother Nature changes. No different than that break that happened, the toilet bowl where people used to jump off at Lake Powell, and then it broke recently and caved in upon itself. And Mother Nature changes over time, heals itself, repairs itself, and we try and protect her in a way, and she's still going to have her history. One of my favorites that we drive by often is down there by, as you're going through the Price Canyon, so Spanish Fork down to Price area, there was that mountain that slid and it flooded those areas. This is like I want to say it's like the Mount Pleasant area where you turn off on that. Yeah, Thistle. Yeah, that was the name of the town.
82, 83.
Yeah, so 82, 83.
Well, it was 83 when it...
1983?
Yeah, when we had all the rains and it had the mudslide and earth dammed the river and flooded Thistle.
It was the same time that the Great Salt Lake flooded down.
All the floods were the same year.
Oh.
The reason why I know is the year I graduated.
Well, it's also the year I was born, so.
Oh, really?
Flooded on top of the earth like that.
We won state the year I was born.
Oh, yeah? Nice. That's good. Cool. Well, are there any other things that we want to talk about? Barth is such a great wealth of information.
I'm sure. Well, but going back to this whole, the base, and you brought up Mother Nature. So recently, we were talking about international and economies and whatnot, how people judge, how people think of how we're doing as a country and how a nation is doing as a country, and they talk about the basically the economy, and that might be doing well, but the other economy is the ecosystem, and that's the real economy of the world.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not, I would say that is on, that's on, as if you want to compare it to a stock market, that economy is kind of crashing or going down.
For sure.
But it can fix itself naturally. And that's what we should be really trying to pay attention to, is the real economy of the world. And that's the ecosystem, because that will have no mercy, and that will change civilizations and nation states, and it will bankrupt economies, because what you cannot, as humans, we cannot fix what Mother Nature will bring upon, the wrath of Mother Nature can bring upon us by not living within her ecosystem or her balances.
Yeah.
We can't pass a law against it. We can't buy it. And we can't fight it. We can't shoot it down.
Yeah.
And Mother Nature will have when it wants to and repair itself, it has no mercy.
Yeah.
It has no mercy on whatever. It just goes to a natural occurrence.
Yeah, it makes absolute sense. And you can liken that to the hurricane that came and touched Tennessee. When does a hurricane touch Tennessee? The way it wrapped around last year and touched Tennessee, or the fires in California, or the fires in Hawaii, or the floods in Pakistan, or places, or the drying up of the Euphrates, the drying up the Mississippi. Like, what we do, the ecosystem will repair itself. And I like what you just said. You can't buy it. You can't build a wall against it. You can't shoot it down. That's a great.
You can't legislate against it.
You can't legislate against it.
Yeah, you just have to. You'll go pagan and start setting fruit offerings out in front of your house. That's not going to come and get you. Is probably what would be.
What's interesting and sad I'm seeing popping up on my newsfeed a lot lately is the U.S. just added X amount of territory in an ocean off of the side of somewhere, or these countries added this much territory. Wait, now we get to own the water and the ocean underneath our territory? So confusing to me.
Well, there's international law that deals with continental shelves, right? So I don't know if that's the same argument that's they've talked about or dealt with between Greece and Turkey and the GNC. If you apply international law, and I forget which, I think it's Greece that owns the most islands in the Aegean. So if you applied them and you took the 7 miles off the islands or the continental shelf, they say, well, the GNC is ours.
Yeah.
Or vice versa. I can't remember which of those nation states it is.
Yeah.
But it's something now that we talk about as indigenous people, that in our prophecies, that this is the 7th generation. And during this time, we've seen all the signs that shows that we're at a crossroads with our, as a civilization and a people or a species. And we have the choice to go one of the ways on this crossroads to save who we are as existence as we know it. And that it's this generation now. And our I would say our prophecies through our spiritual leaders have said these signs have showed up, and these signs tell us that we're in this time of where we have to make a change. And that was recently when this white buffalo calf was born, and also a white whale calf was born. Now these are not albino in their species; they're actually white. A white buffalo calf and a white whale. And
you can tell that from their eyes, or you can tell that how?
Well, they're not how an albino will be born white, but
it's not a pigment in their color.
Correct,
it's a certain
correct. And that was one of the signs of the prophecies to indigenous people that we're at a crossroads, and we have to make a change now. And with that, there were other signs. It was saying that the signs will say that trees will be dying from the top down, rivers will be running backwards. So the unknown, or the Great Spirit, which was with the Great Mystery, has told us as indigenous people that when these signs come, this is when you have a chance as a human species to make a change in how you're living with the environment and Mother Nature.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense even when you pull it back to science. Like, how does a river run backwards? Polar shift? Probably how a river
currents changing.
Yeah.
Currents rising, natural rivers running backwards.
Yeah, for sure. Or you look at the continental divide, and the continental divide, a lot of people don't know this, but on one side of the divide, the water runs to the Gulf. On the other side, it runs to the Pacific, and that's what the continental divide is. And so how do you get waters to run backwards? Interesting.
Change in currents, but also they see also the change in animals and species. There's a group in Australia that island people, Northern Australia, and they sued in international court against human rights. They sued the Australian government, saying you're not doing enough for climate change, and it's taking away our human rights. But this group, because they live every day with the ocean and they make their living and they're tied to the ocean, they've noticed different types of crabs and animals that are acting differently because they're being affected by the weather.
Yeah.
And it's making them change who they are. These animals, these species, or these crabs, these crustaceans are acting differently. And so there's all these telltale signs of something's going on differently within the environment.
What's interesting to me that you just said is sometimes when people hear lawsuit, they say you're not doing enough for environmental change. You got people that, thing is we wouldn't even know about this story unless the lawsuits crept up and there was a reason for us to read the highlight. And it's really unfortunate that the studies and the pieces and the organizations have to even exist for us to put out, these findings through places of lawsuit. Like, so places Rather than bring in the scientists to study it, a lawsuit happens. Now that brings in the science to study it, to know the valuation of how the lawsuit should go in a way.
Right.
So,
Well, it brings awareness. And I believe India and New Zealand were the first two countries that gave rivers human rights.
whoa, wait, what?
And so that they could a river could sue in court with human rights.
A river? Wait, where? It's India and what?
In New Zealand.
India and New Zealand. And the rivers have
human rights.
Wow.
So they're standing in court.
Who represents and speaks for the river?
Some
a board?
Probably a president. Yeah, it probably gets appointed some sort of council to present its case.
Whoa, I like that. I like that. That's like Harry Potter on steroids. I'd say that's Lord of the Rings, or man, what would you even, the Elvins.
And so it goes back to the Lorax. The Lorax speaks for the trees.
The Lorax.
And you just have to give voice. You have to give voice to environment. You have to give standing and voice to where something does not have power and can be represented. Those are novel ideas. It's the same way of like environmental laws. No, everyone just one assumes where environmental laws came from. I know that in the early 70s, we passed environmental acts with President Nixon passed Clean Water Act, Clean Air Act.
Yeah.
And these were to protect the environment against corporate America through capitalism, because at the end of the day, they're going to exploit everything they can for their own interests.
Yeah.
And so these environmental laws that we needed in the Americas, because, rivers in Ohio that were on fire. But no one, like when I've posed this question to attorneys and people that are a nuance in environmental issues. And I've asked them, I said, do you know where environmental laws came from? Because you just assume they just arose from something. Yeah. Well, from my understanding and through my University of Utah education, I'll put a plug in there for
That's nice.
Environmental laws came out of nuisance laws. And so I believe there was this group, and there was a group of people that lived in a nice area in Tennessee along one of the rivers. And they probably had second homes or vacation homes, but they were co-located next to a rock quarry. So this rock quarry for 24/7 would run trucks up and down the road, and it created a lot of dust. And that dust was going on the river, and actually to whatever your argument as a homeowner or a fisherman would say, well, you're ruining the environment. You're ruining this. And no one had and so, yeah, I'm ruining so what? I'm ruining the environment. What can you do to stop it? Right? There was no laws against that.
Yeah.
So the standing where environmental laws were created, they got their standing from nuisance laws. So these people sue the gravel company for being a nuisance because the dust they're putting.
Yeah.
And that's where the original case law came from, environmental laws.
Wow. Interesting.
So that goes back, right? So that goes back to something that someone's creative by this indigenous people in Northern Australia suing the Australian government for human rights because their lifestyles are affecting their lifestyles. It's the same courage that people stood up and gave rivers human rights.
Yeah, it makes sense. I worked at a mine in my past, and what I learned from this group was we had it's called a Title B permit, and there's a certain amount of dust that you can create as you mine, and it gives you a tonnage ratio that you can mine. And I want to say that our tonnage at that time was either 800,000 or 1.3 million of gypsum rock. And if we enclosed the mine, which you can do, you literally enclose the mine and the bag house and everything else, and you close it in a big building so it sucks up all the air, then you could add more tonnage to your mine. So what's interesting is you can't build homes on top of certain minerals. There's several reasons why. One of the main reasons is certain minerals you build a home up on top of, if it gets wet, it'll sink. And so people bring water So it'll really sink into it. Another reason why is because you want to utilize the resource the best you can to get down to the bedrock and utilize the resource. But what was interesting to me was the gentleman had done an EPA research, and it literally said, if we broadcast seed native grasses and flowers across this 2,600 acres, the EPA will give us an increase on our tonnage we can do by 200 or 300,000 tons. If we pave the road rather than on the BLM side, or rather than put down mag chloride, it'll increase it by so much. And it was just interesting how it was a science, literal science, to create that backing that you talk about. And so, it's fascinating how we have to coexist with nature. Man, I love that. The water, the rivers have rights. Would you be on that board?
Yeah.
We talked about this the other day. Literally the other day. We talked about this interesting one about how they move water in Utah.
Oh, yeah.
And when I mentioned, I'd never heard of this before. And when I mentioned it, have you literally said, that's not right? It was so funny. So I don't know if that's what you said, but
No, it's not.
fair.
It's okay.
Fair.
No, it's good. And a lot of people think this is when you do novel stuff like this. Basically, you have to have these voices, and you have to have these concerns, and because you're representing someone that can't represent themselves, so you're representing people or issues that can't stand on their own.
Yeah, I love that.
And as we say, these people are true warriors, and as you know, um, warriors don't always have to fight; they just have to stand up. And if it wasn't for these people that I mentioned on this Tom Newmark and Suzanne Simard, look what they're doing in the regen field, and they're. I know that Suzanne received a lot of hate mail for her discoveries because it went against logging industries. But what they were doing is they were validating what the indigenous people and the original caretakers of this land have always thought and viewed. And these ideas aren't taught in school, and I don't mean the principles of these ideals aren't taught in like school when you're K through 12 or these younger grades, but it's the grace that where these principles come from should be taught.
Yeah.
Not so much the science and the discoveries. Sure, that's a higher level of education, but to honor the graciousness and the steps and the process and the way these people thought to cultivate these ideas, that should be nuanced with people at a younger age for students, because it's powerful.
Yes, for sure.
Do you think it would be easier to teach the grace or teach the principles? And might teaching the principles bring the grace?
I think they coexist. And I was thinking about this from a community standpoint, that we don't learn from this Michael Rising underground. That is the community and the gracefulness that it lends itself to help everyone that's not doing well. And we as humanistics, because we have different value systems and different inborn prejudice of us versus them, and these are natural things that exist in humanistics, but if they're not curtailed, if they're not honored or recognized, then they operate differently. But if you could show that all these different types of, if someone needs help, you have this lending mother tree under the ground that helps everyone along to heal themselves. But we don't, as a society, we push and shun some of those people, those issues and those peoples away, but also we don't prepare them. Those people aren't prepared because, an example, what might be, I'll give an example. This could be a controversial example, but I see these, and the only reason why I say this, because I grew up overseas, and I grew up around a lot of in third world countries, a lot of conflict, but I also grew up around the American military. And I see these young kids that joined the army or and they went off and they came from small towns, and a lot of times these kids didn't have any place to go, and their parents, they went into the army for betterment, or not, right? Sometimes people just wanted to go, but if they went into a conflict, or they didn't have to be in a conflict, but they had the time of their life. 18 years old, they had the best friends, they put adrenaline, they put their lives on the line, and it created a bond. But they dated when they were overseas, they partied, they had this beautiful time. It was golden.
Mhm.
But when they came back to the States, their town had moved past them, their childhood friends have gone away, and they also saw a world that was so far away from the artificial reality that they probably grew up in the United States when they went overseas because the trauma they might have witnessed. And they for them on, they have PTSD, and there's nothing for them when they come home for them to be honored or to be handled gracefully so they could detox from those experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And it's simple. It doesn't have to be this huge VA benefit package. It doesn't have to be all this constant honoring and flying the American flag and shaking their hand. It's just a simple something from a community standpoint that it's you could sit with that person and value who they are, or a holistic,
Social
underground, social. It's like that mother tree,
yeah,
given a little drop of sugar once in a while, a little bit of this. Remember the story that we heard about this gentleman that had trauma through his political actions, and he was from an indigenous community, and he was standing there broken, and he was moving cows from field to field. And this one cow recognized and sensed his trauma,
yeah,
and came and stood with him every day and leaned on him and supported him.
yeah.
And through that time, that cow that he said he didn't like cows because they were not attractive and they were dirty, he thought. But he said, to this day, that cow healed me by winking its big eyes at me and leaning on me and always looking over and checking on me.
Yeah.
And that's this regenerative agricultural spirit that is beneath our feet, that if we take it above ground and put it back in our communities, I think from a humanistic standpoint, it would be very valuable. The crop would be better at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So
There's
to
a
speak.
place for everyone. I
Yeah.
agree.
Yes.
Powerful.
Yeah.
Truly amazing. So, Barth, I want to touch on your history, if we can, a little bit. That will maybe give some additional validation to the human that you've already presented yourself to us. That's amazing, by the way. But can you give us a little bit of your history, family history here in Utah, and maybe back to your great grandfather?
Well, from a family history, I've been blessed and had the unique opportunity to be given the life I had by my parents. That's only because my mom is Native American, my dad is non-Native, and my mom was born and raised on a Rosebud Reservation, orphaned as a child, and was raised by her grandmother and aunts, and she was educated at a Catholic school, and she just had she always strived to better herself, and she received a good education from this school, and she had the opportunity to leave the reservation, and she met my father here in Utah. And so by being first people of Native American indigenous to this land, she also met my dad, who was a Robinson and a Hanson, who were Mormon settlers, and they settled American Fork. So my great grandfather there's a park named after him in American Fork, Robinson Park. And so I've had the people that have lived out west, and the people forget who settled the West, obviously the indigenous people were always here, but it's the Mormons and the Spaniards, and their story's not told out west, or it's not honored so much out west. We go more to this gold rush and manifest destiny story over how the Western United States came about. But that having that, and then my dad, during that time when my parents met, my dad was with the Army out in Dugway, but he later became employed by the State Department and was a diplomat. So as a young child, I moved overseas and lived overseas for 18 years, and mostly third world countries, Middle East and Far East, and come back to the States every 2 years, come to Utah County, American Fork, Lehigh, and go to the reservation, during every 2 or 3 years. But it was through that appreciation of me growing up in third world countries and playing outside and being in the marketplace every day, being around local and indigenous people that are on our barter system, and was in fact, when I first came back to the States and thought I was an all-American kid and whatnot, but I struggled with I'd say probably PTSD and a little bit depressed, because I felt like the life I lived didn't exist. Just recently, I thought it was like a dream.
Yeah.
And it was so long ago, and I was thrown into this consumption, going to college here, consumption atmosphere of fraternity parties and this American lifestyle. And it took me, I knew it existed and I was part of that, but I knew it wasn't. And I always just felt that it was just such an artificial ecosystem compared to the rest of the world, so to speak.
Yeah, for sure. How does that equate to, is it 2 greats back? So your grandfather settled American Fork, grandfather before him, and then railroad.
Oh, so that my great grandfather is Edward Robinson, and he was the first conductor of a railroad
in the world.
And that was in England. Edward
First
Robinson,
conductor in the world
on a railroad. And so that's why
Can you imagine? No offense, but I'm just gonna take this. It's a steam engine, if I had to guess.
Steam engine.
Okay, so I remember when my friend built a 50 caliber gun, and we took it out to the range, and it's like, who's gonna pull the trigger? Who's gonna pull the trigger? You just built this thing. Your grandpa got behind a steam engine that somebody else built to literally power things down the train, and just got in willy-nilly to feed that furnace. Wow.
Yeah, that's why I want to meet with some of the principals here in the Valley and offer my nuanced branding for their sports franchise.
Yeah, which would be what?
The name?
Yeah.
Would be the Moguls, but you can make it the Ice Moguls for the hockey team. But the reason why is because of a few things. Is a lot of people don't know what a mogul is. Of course, a mogul could be someone that is a wealthy individual, but a mogul is a steam engine.
Wow.
So you take And also you could take a mogul for skiing. So it's got all this dual usage. But then you take Golden Spike and Promontory Point,
Yep.
where East and West met for the railroad.
Yep.
It's such a perfect name for a hockey team to be the Ice Moguls.
Yeah, absolutely. Plus, when nobody wants to be the goalie when a mogul's coming down with a puck.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
Makes a lot of sense to me. So, Ryan, if you're listening, there's a shout out to the real name.
Yeah. Before you go down with being the Yetis, let's be the Ice Moguls.
Yeah, just think about it. Think about it. That's good. Cool. Well, we appreciate the overview. It's amazing the history that you've come from, as well as your mom and everything that she went through to bring you here. You are definitely leading on and expounding that legacy in a great way. I really appreciate the regenerative social side that you are and how you literally breathe great relationships. I've seen it all over in the times I've hang out with you. You breathe great relationships to an environment. And then when it comes down to it, we all have fun and we joke and we have big laughters. But man, when it comes down to business, Barth is right on it. He's like, so I really appreciate that because we need that as well too if we're going to make regenerative organic agriculture a big play and move forward in America for, quite frankly, the economy, the ecology pieces that are needed.
Right. Well, I mean, people asked, what do I do and what do I work on? And I should always say that I work with the best people in the world, like you and Abby. Every day I get to work with the best people. It's not so much of what space I'm in or what project I'm working on. I always get up and it gets me going because I'm gonna get a call from someone today and I'm gonna feed off their energy, and they're probably the best people and humans that I get to work in the world. And so it's beautiful. Every morning I wake up, I have my new mushroom coffee, new year, new me.
Nice.
And I look forward to someone blowing my phone up with great news and how they're going to take over the world.
That's awesome. I love it. Abby, any other thoughts you have? Or deep questions you want to ask him?
Deep questions. Just who are some people that you look up to as mentors or people that you might suggest that we talk to, like Susan? Anybody else that you would suggest?
Well, these people I mentioned in Regen are, that's just the tip of the iceberg because I just started getting into the space. But, there's the pioneers, there's the people that didn't publish, there's the people that were in coffee shops and they had these ideas and they talked loudly and everyone thought they were like, this is just a crazy person with a different idea, and that's where you get all your energy from and your and these new marketplace ideas. So the people I look up are the people that are, I like market disruptors, people that break down silos. I like people that could break down the dominance of a commodity or an economy and share and take that back to the people and let them share and benefit of a marketplace that existed before that they had before, and take those benefits and those fruits back to them. The simplest case I can mention that I'm working on and I'm intrigued about is just and I've worked with great people on this, is healthcare. And so what you could do with healthcare now is most of America does not have adequate healthcare in their rural communities. And so what it does, it's not so much them not having the healthcare, it changed the whole economy in rural America because they don't have their hospitals and clinics can't bill at higher rates and perform other medical services. So all that money and commerce leaves a small rural town and goes to the next big town next to it. So it's a constant drain on an ecosystem and an economy. And so if you could reverse that flow and put that funding back into those small towns, you'll see them benefit. It's so right now it's like taking the library out of a small town and it can't function anymore. And so by breaking these silos down and being a market disruptor. You could do that with healthcare, you could do that with regen agriculture, and you could do that with energy. And makes everyone makes everyone a participant. It co-ops it, and so everyone from around the whole community could actually participate in that commerce, in that platform.
Makes sense. It's a different type of mining. It's almost like no different than the cancer rates in Iowa. It's like we need the calories in the big cities so much to the point that we're putting these fungicides and herbicides and pesticides on the crops. We're creating the illness now. And then we're also harvesting your illness to send it back into the big city where you can't take care of it in your own rural economy. That's what you just basically stated to me, right?
Yeah.
That's crazy to me.
The fun part, it's all connected though. So what came to mind was regenerative agriculture and small gardens and victory gardens, as they used to be called, bringing that back to people so that they have their health in mind. So we're not only regenerating the soil, but we're regenerating the human that then can regenerate their own economy locally, where they don't need the healthcare. It's their own healthcare.
I would agree.
Yeah.
I would agree.
Right.
I've seen humans recently eat their soil. Like literally lick it off their fingers. That rich stuff out of the Amazon that you're talking about was black. It was called this Johnson Sue or something like that. And they were literally licking it and eating it. It was so crazy. And what's funny is this gentleman who's an MIU university student, I was like looking at him for probably a solid 3 minutes. And we just like, it was like somebody said, were you looking into his soul? Or was he looking into your soul? No, I was literally analyzing what was going on in his body that he could literally just eat it that way. Like, what's going on? What's being broken down? Can you imagine that? Eating that old soil from the Amazon? Got to go find some of that soil.
Gold.
Right.
Gold. All right. Any other questions we have?
I got nothing.
No, I'm ready to become an undergraduate at MIU and start learning.
I like it. Cool. Sounds good. All right. That's a wrap.